Hey guys, tonight we drift back through time and tide, into the fog-bound waters of the Venetian Lagoon. You're gliding now, slowly, gently, over dark and glassy water. There's no motor hum, no rush, just the occasional creak of old wood, and the quiet splash of an oar dipping in and out. Moonlight casts a silvery glaze over the waves. Ahead, low in the distance, you see shadows rising. Long, low islands, cloaked in mist. The air smells faintly of salt and old stone. You've arrived at Venice, but not the tourist Venice, not the gondola and gelato Venice. This is the Venice of forgotten plague ships, drifting bodies, and ghost-ridden quarantine islands. You'll step foot tonight on shores where thousands came to die, and perhaps never truly left. And here's a reality check. You probably wouldn't have survived this. The city may be beautiful, but it was once a front-line battlefield in the war against death itself. Disease didn't just knock on the door, it sailed right through it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, leave a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing where and when you're tuning in. Now, let's go back. The year doesn't matter. Not yet. You're simply here, floating, observing. You're a silent witness, unbothered by time, untouched by disease. The stars above ripple across the surface of the water as your boat nudges slowly past weather-worn pilings and algae-covered stones. Venice does not greet you with noise, but with stillness. The city looks like a dream. Its towers and domes rise from the sea as if conjured by some ancient painter. But beneath that beauty, history runs deep and dark. Your small wooden boat glides past a crumbling brick outpost, the Porta de Mar, once the maritime gate to Venice. In the height of its power, this gateway watched thousands of ships pass each year. Goods flowed in from the east: silk, cinnamon, porcelain, ivory. The Serenissima, what Venetians called their republic, was a spiderweb of trade routes, spun across continents. But the sea brought more than treasure. The boat turns, quietly slipping down a narrower channel. You pass a sleeping gull, balanced atop a broken post. The smell in the air shifts slightly. Less salt, more soil. You're approaching the islands. They're small, strange things, shaped by human hands and forgotten by time. There's San Clemente, San Servolo, Lazzaretto Nuovo, and further out, Lazzaretto Vecchio and Poveglia. Lazzaretto Vecchio is your first stop. It's the original, the oldest known quarantine island in the world. It doesn't look like much. A few buildings rise from overgrown grass, walls chipped and sinking. But 500 years ago, it was a place of desperate hope and deep fear. As your boat bumps gently against the stone quay, you realize how quiet the island is. No birds sing. No breeze moves the cypresses, just the whisper of the tide brushing the shore. Step lightly now. The air is thick with memory. Once, plague ships anchored nearby. Venice, terrified of what might arrive inside their wooden bellies, would not allow them into the city. The sick were rowed here, to the Lazzaretto. Here they stayed. Here they died. A single bell would toll each morning, not for time, but for death. When you heard it, it meant someone was gone, and still, the city continued, oblivious to most, rich beyond belief. The palazzos across the water glittered with candlelight and opera, even as death whispered across the lagoon. You walk slowly along a cracked path, past the remnants of an old chapel. A plaque, faded by salt and wind, marks the year, 1423, the official founding of the quarantine system. That's right. This is where it began. The word quarantine comes from 40 giorni, 40 days. That's how long newcomers had to wait before entering Venice if they arrived during a time of plague. It wasn't science at first. It was superstition. But it worked. Or, at least, it helped. You sit now, quietly, on the edge of a broken stone bench. The tide laps at the mossy foundations. The Lazzaretto feels suspended in time, untouched by the centuries. You could swear you hear something distant, maybe the creak of an old cart, or a voice carried on the wind. But there is no one here now, just the stones, just the sea. The night deepens, the fog thickens. You're not scared, only curious. You feel the weight of history all around you, heavy but not oppressive. It presses gently, like a warm blanket. You let it surround you. Soon, we'll walk deeper into the island. We'll meet those who stayed behind. We'll trace their rituals and whispers. But for now, let's just sit, quietly, and listen. To water, to stone, to stories sleeping just beneath the surface. The sun never fully rises in your dream of Venice tonight. Instead, a gentle gray light pulses behind the clouds, illuminating the surface of the lagoon with a soft silver glow. You rise from your seat on the edge of the Lazzaretto Vecchio and begin to walk, your footsteps making no sound on the worn flagstones. The island isn't large, barely more than a narrow, crumbling crescent of land, but it is dense with layers of the past. Before this place became a sanctuary for the sick, Venice was a city consumed by something else entirely: trade. Close your eyes and imagine the city in its heyday, the 14th century. The Doge rules from the Palazzo Ducale. Merchants in crimson robes negotiate in a dozen dialects in the square. Sailors unload crates of dried figs, saffron, coral, lacquerware, and bolts of silk dyed the color of wine. Venice is the jewel of the Adriatic, perched between east and west, growing rich off the goods of distant empires. But behind the opulence, you feel the heartbeat of risk. Every crate from Constantinople, every package from the Levant, every sailor returning from the Black Sea. These are not just bearers of wealth. They are also bearers of shadow. Disease is not understood yet, not really. It is thought to be in the air, or the stars, or the anger of God. Still, Venetian officials begin to notice a pattern. Sickness follows ships. You're now standing in the harbor, as it might have been 600 years ago. There is noise all around. Sailors shouting, ropes creaking, gulls wheeling overhead. The smell of salt and spice mixes with sweat and tar. Suddenly, a ship appears on the horizon. It moves too slowly, too quietly. The crew doesn't wave. There are no shouts. Just a flag, black and silent, rising on the mast. The captain shouts something unintelligible, his voice hoarse from days at sea. You hear only fragments: fever, rats, dead. The ship is ordered to stop, far from the docks. It drifts, anchored near the islands, with guards posted on shore to ensure no one escapes. You see it now, a city trying to survive a threat it cannot see. This wasn't the first plague Venice had faced, but it would be the most horrifying. It is 1347. Some call it the Great Mortality. Others just call it the pestilence. It spreads faster than fear. Genoese ships bring it first, likely from the Black Sea. But soon, Venice is gasping under its weight. It enters the city in silence. A cough here, a sudden fever there. But within weeks, it is undeniable. Entire families vanish within days. Bodies are left in alleys, under bridges, floating quietly in the canals. Now you're drifting again, in your dream, floating along the narrow canals of the city. You pass shuttered windows. A child cries in a distant courtyard. Bells toll again and again, not for prayer, for death. Venice reacts with a strange mix of fear and precision. While many flee, those who can afford to anyway, others stay and organize. The Republic does something extraordinary. It begins to study the spread. It learns that proximity matters, that ships are dangerous, that the sick must be kept apart from the well. It is here that the first official quarantine system in recorded history is born. You watch, in ghostly form, as a meeting takes place in the Doge's palace. Bearded men in dark robes speak in hushed tones. 40 giorni, one says. 40 days. That's how long each ship must wait, offshore, before its crew or cargo can enter the city. If anyone shows symptoms, they are removed, taken to the Lazzaretto, left to be watched, treated if possible, buried if not. You glide now past a massive galley ship, anchored just offshore. It rocks gently, its sails furled, its deck mostly empty. But below, in the hold, there are sounds. Soft, sobbing, rustling, whispers. They are waiting out the 40 days. Some will make it. Others will not. Back on the island, you pass a stone wall carved with Latin. It's a warning, a promise, a plea. It reminds the living that their vigilance keeps the city alive. You move along the path again, back toward the dock. The fog is lifting slightly. A breeze brushes the tops of the tall grasses. The ghosts of the past do not startle you. They walk with you. Venice became rich because it embraced the world, but it survived the plague because it learned to hold the world at arm's length. It is a strange balance, openness and isolation, commerce and caution. Venice lived between them, and still does. The light shifts again. Somewhere across the lagoon, another bell tolls. It's time to go deeper, to see what they built next, when the waiting ships were not enough, when the sick needed land of their own. The morning mist hangs low over the lagoon as you step back into your dreamlike boat. The wood is old and wet, the edge is mossy, but it doesn't leak. The vessel knows these waters. It guides itself, slowly, almost reverently, toward a nearby island. Lazzaretto Vecchio drifts behind you, half swallowed by the fog once more. Ahead now lies a new silhouette, faint but present. Another island, another chapter. The year is still 1347, but time no longer feels linear. You're simply present as memory unfolds. And as the plague deepens its hold, Venice's leaders realize something critical. Quarantine alone is not enough. Some ships carry sick crew, not just hidden infection. The city cannot afford to treat them on board. They must be removed, given space to live or die without endangering others. This necessity gives birth to an extraordinary concept, the isolation hospital. Not just a place to wait, but a place designed entirely to contain illness, and perhaps, against all odds, to treat it. So, the Republic commissions its first official plague hospital on solid land. The location? A small island just southeast of Venice, one already sparsely used by religious orders and burial caretakers. They clear it. They build walls. They create the Lazzaretto. Its full name is Lazzaretto Vecchio, Old Lazzaretto, though in 1423, when it first opens, it's simply the Lazzaretto, a compound of low brick buildings, arched corridors, and tiled roofs. Surrounding it, the sea, protecting the city from the sick, and the sick from the city. You glide into its harbor again, but now through history. The dock is busy with masked officials, boatmen carefully unloading stretchers. Men in gloves pass notes to one another using long metal rods. No touching. Everyone keeps distance. Everyone wears cloths soaked in vinegar over their mouths. A patient is carried ashore. He moans softly. His eyes are dull, sunken. The plague has taken his strength. His body is fevered, his skin spotted with strange bruises. He is not alone. Dozens are brought here every week, sometimes hundreds. And yet, there is order. The Lazzaretto is designed with purpose. Patients are separated by symptom. Some lie on beds in open-air courtyards. Sunlight was believed to help. Others are kept in stone chambers, where the stench of sweat and rot is strongest. The caretakers live on the island too. Monks mostly. Later, hired nurses and volunteers. Many do not survive long, but some endure. They work with quiet dignity, changing linens, boiling herbs, writing letters for the dying. You follow one now. He walks with a limp, a cloth tied tight over his face. In his arms, a wooden bowl of broth. He sets it beside a sleeping patient, then sits for a moment. His breath is heavy. He knows he's not safe, but he stays. Not everyone on the island is infected. Some have merely been exposed. A sailor whose ship had a case on board. A merchant who touched the wrong crate. These people are kept apart. Watched carefully. Most survive. Some do not. The Lazzaretto has its own rhythms. Each morning, bells signal meals. Later, prayers. Sometimes screams. Always bells. You walk the corridors now. There's something oddly peaceful about the repetition. The way the light filters through small windows, the scent of salt and thyme from drying herbs. You pass a chapel where candles flicker beneath a wooden crucifix. A small plaque beside it reads simply, "For those in waiting." Time here is fluid. 40 days, then maybe more. Some are cleared and returned to the city. Others vanish into shallow graves on the island itself. The cemetery lies behind the main building, near the trees. You wander there now. There are no markers, just land and quiet. Beneath the soil lie thousands of bones, some still being discovered today. Not buried deeply. The ground is shallow, the graves hasty, but there is reverence in the way they were placed. Arms folded, bodies facing east. The workers prayed over each one. You kneel now at the edge of this burial field, the grass brushing your fingertips. Somewhere nearby, a bird calls, faint, tired. You imagine the voices that once filled this space, the coughs, the whispered names, the final breaths. The Lazzaretto was not a place of healing, not, truly. It was a threshold, a pause between worlds, a place where the sick were not cast out entirely, but held, gently, away from the rest. It was mercy and self-preservation in equal parts. From here, the idea spreads. Other cities copy it. Milan, Dubrovnik, Marseille. But Venice was first. It's strange to think of a hospital as a ghost story. But here, every corridor feels watched. Not maliciously, just attentively. As if those who pass still listen. The breeze stirs again. Your boat waits at the dock. It's time to move on. Not far from here lies another island, one less orderly, less known, where quarantine gave way to something darker. You push away once more from the edge of the Lazzaretto Vecchio, and your boat obeys like an old friend. The water beneath you feels thicker now, as though time itself has settled in layers below the hull. The fog hangs lower again, cloaking the route ahead in pale gray, but your direction is certain. You're moving toward the first plague ships, toward the moment the death truly arrived. The year is still 1347, and the Republic of Venice holds its breath. You aren't in the lagoon anymore, not exactly. You're floating offshore, in the deeper water, just beyond the barrier islands. The mainland lies far behind, a blurred memory of domes and campaniles. Here, the sea feels colder, the wind sharper. Now, you see it. A ship, long, low, and listing slightly to one side. Its sail hangs limp, its flag frayed at the edges. It's motionless, anchored, but abandoned. The wood is blackened with sea rot. The ropes heavy with mildew. No voices, no music, only silence. This was a galley once, full of spices and wool and eastern goods. It came from the Black Sea, carrying wares from Tana or Kaffa. But somewhere along the voyage, the fever began. It started with a cook, then 2 sailors, then the quartermaster. By the time the ship reached Venice, half the crew was dead. The remaining half begged for entry, but Venice had already heard rumors, whispers from Genoa, Pisa, Marseille, strange deaths, swollen necks, black spots, corpses rotting before they were cold. And so, this ship was stopped, quarantined, left adrift in limbo just outside the city's reach. You draw closer now, your boat nudging gently against its side. A mooring line still hangs over the edge, frayed and slack. You pull yourself up, not with fear, but with dreamlike curiosity. The deck is nearly silent, just the soft creak of timbers and the sigh of the wind. You step carefully past an overturned barrel. A single boot lies forgotten beside it. Feathers from a seagull flutter in a tangle of rope. A lantern sways from a hook, unlit. The hold smells like old salt and something else, metallic and bitter. Below, there are hammocks. Most are empty now. A few hold shapes. You don't linger. Instead, you walk to the captain's quarters. The door hangs half open, swinging slightly on rusted hinges. Inside, a desk, a half-written letter, and a sealed jar of preserved figs. On the desk is a logbook. Its last entry reads, 5th day since the fever took Marco. I do not think I will write again. I ask mercy for my crew. For the city, we did not know. The ink is smeared. You close the book gently, placing it back where you found it. This is not the only ship. Far from it. Throughout the mid-14th century, dozens more would follow. Some were caught early and sent away. Others slipped through, bringing the sickness with them. Once, a merchant bribed a port guard to let his crew disembark. Within a week, 40 were dead in the San Polo district. These ships became floating prisons. Their crews waited out the 40 days, rationing their food, watching one another. If someone coughed, if someone stumbled, the others drew away. The fear was constant, but so was hope. Many prayed to Saint Rocco, the patron saint of plague victims. They hung small icons on the mast, carved charms into the wood. Some tied red cloths around their wrists to ward off the invisible threat. You stand now at the bow, looking back at the city. Venice does not seem close. It seems impossibly far, as though across a veil. The domes shimmer behind the mist. The sound of bells barely reaches your ears. No rescue comes. The ship becomes a skeleton. When the days pass and no further illness is reported, the boat may finally be allowed to dock. The crew, those who remain, are brought to the Lazzaretto, examined, bathed, observed. Some survive, most do not. And the ship? It is burned. Yes, burned. Not all, but many. Venice learned to destroy the threat rather than risk it. Ships were towed to a remote section of the lagoon, loaded with oil and resin, and set alight. The flames lit the water for miles. Smoke drifted over the marshes, thick and acrid. They called them fire barges. You see one now, in memory. It burns slowly at first, then roars to life. Plumes of orange curl into the sky. The scent is heavy. Salt, pitch, wood, death. A form of mourning, a ceremony of purification. No one speaks during the burning. You turn back now, descending from the plague ship. The hull groans beneath your feet. The sea cradles it like a tired child. And then, you're gone, back in your own boat. The ship drifts behind you, smaller and smaller, until it vanishes in the fog. Its story lingers. So many entered Venice through water. So many never made it to shore. And some, they say, still haven't left the sea. Your boat glides once more across the water, its bow cutting silently through the mist. The scent of burnt wood still clings faintly to the air behind you, fading slowly as the fire barge disappears into the fog. The lagoon lies open ahead, but you aren't moving randomly. No, your destination has already taken form in your mind. Another island, a place with walls, with rows of identical windows and doorways. A place built not for the living, exactly, but for the infected. You're approaching the Lazzarettos, after Venice realized the plague would return, again and again, like the tide. The Republic understood that a single isolation island would never be enough, so they built more. By the 15th and 16th centuries, Venice developed one of the most sophisticated systems of quarantine in the known world. A network of island hospitals, checkpoints, fumigation centers, and surveillance points. Each one had a purpose, and they were all guarded by the sea. You now arrive at Lazzaretto Nuovo, the New Lazzaretto. Built in 1468, more than a generation after Lazzaretto Vecchio, this island became a holding station for ships and goods before people were even allowed to disembark. Unlike its older sibling, this was not for the visibly ill. This was for the possibly contaminated. The boat nudges into the mooring, and you step ashore. The island feels larger, flatter. The buildings are low and wide, long warehouse-style halls, where cargo was once stored in silence for 40 days at a time. You walk into one now. The walls are lined with giant hooks, some still bearing iron loops used to hoist heavy crates. Every item off a ship, from bolts of cloth to olive oil, spices to copper, was placed here and left untouched for the full 40 giorni. Why? Because they believed that plague could linger on surfaces, even on coins, even on paper. They weren't entirely wrong. You move deeper into the warehouse.
The air smells of dust and salt. You hear faint echoes, scraping, murmurs, wood shifting, ghost sounds. Look down at the floor. There, scratched into the stone and wood by workers long ago, are names. Not graffiti exactly, just small reminders. Giovanni, 1572. Marco de Fiori, Taddeo Fucarlo. Men who worked here wore heavy gloves, covered their mouths, and lived on the island during each cargo period. 40 days at a time, isolated from the world, watching over objects as though they held spirits. And perhaps they did. In another building, you find the old pharmacy, a storage area for camphor, vinegar, herbs, and oils. Barrels of vinegar were used to wash incoming goods. Letters from ships were pierced with a spike and held over smoke before being sent to the mainland. Everything had its ritual. There is peace in repetition, in routine. You feel that now as you walk from room to room. The island doesn't feel haunted, not exactly, just filled with memory, like walking through the pages of an old ledger. Somewhere nearby, a bell rings, but it's only in your mind. You sit now beneath an overhang, watching the sea. Across the water, you can make out the edge of Venice itself, its towers blurred by the thick air. You imagine how the city must have looked to those stationed here, waiting day after day, close, beautiful, forbidden. The guards were strict. Anyone who tried to leave early was arrested, sometimes executed. Quarantine was not optional, it was law. At the far edge of the island stands a small stone post, the column of justice they called it. It's said that executions happen nearby. No ceremony, just silence. A message to others. Do not break the cordon. You rise and walk to the shoreline. This place feels forgotten now, but it was once a linchpin in the Republic's defense against collapse. By the time the 17th century arrived, Venice was not just rich. It was resilient. The plague came, but Venice endured, in part because of places like this. And yet, despite all the organization, the structure, the science, they could not stop the stories, rumors, of strange noises in the night, of sick men who never appeared on any roster, women who arrived healthy but vanished, shadows moving through storage rooms after the workers had gone to sleep. Some say that the very goods stored here absorbed the suffering of those who carried them, that the tapestries whispered, that the bolts of silk wept. You smile faintly. You do not believe in curses, but you do believe in memory, in the way a place can hold on to emotion, pain, fear, hope, long after the people are gone. You feel the island shifting behind you as the tide begins to turn. It's time to move once more. Ahead lies the next stage of Venice's quarantine empire, but darker, sadder, and still pulsing with a quiet, unspoken fear. The boat rocks gently as you leave Lazzaretto Nuovo behind. You glance back once, watching the quiet warehouses fade into the fog, their empty doors open like unblinking eyes. But already, your attention is pulled forward, drawn to another island, not much farther away. This one feels different. You feel it before you see it, a slight pressure in the air, a hush in the water. The mist is heavier now, the breeze colder. Your boat drifts slower, as if hesitant, but you press onward. You're returning to Lazzaretto Vecchio, this time not as an observer. Tonight, you walk through a full day in the life of the island, as it might have been in its busiest, most burdened hours. The year could be 1575 or 1630. Both saw plague return with vengeance. In either case, the scene is the same. You awaken in a narrow bed, one of dozens arranged side by side in a vaulted chamber. The walls are brick, the floor stone. The air is thick and unmoving, scented with sweat, vinegar, and rosemary. You're not sick, yet. But your roommate, 2 cots away, has not moved since last night. A caretaker enters, a young man, face hidden behind a linen mask, soaked in oil of turpentine. He carries a shallow bowl of soup. He leaves it beside your bed without a word. Others follow, some changing linens, some lighting candles at a small makeshift altar near the door. The sick are many, the workers are few. Outside, the rhythm of the island begins. You walk along the colonnade, passing the chapel first. Inside, a monk kneels, whispering prayers for the dying. His voice is hoarse but calm. You pause at the threshold, but do not enter. The courtyard beyond is crowded with stretchers. The sun hasn't risen fully, but the work has begun. Gravediggers prepare the day's burials, men and women carry buckets of clean water, and a physician stands with his notebook, recording symptoms and names. You follow him for a time. His mask, long and curved like a bird's beak, is stuffed with dried herbs, lavender, cloves, mint. He believes it will protect him from the foul miasma of the disease. He believes it wards off death. He might be wrong. He stops at a patient lying on a thin blanket beneath a cypress tree. The woman has fever. Her face is flushed, eyes glazed. She whispers a name, maybe her child's, then turns her face away. The physician moves on. You pass the kitchens next. The cooks, also quarantined, work with caution. Bread is baked without touching. Water is boiled 3 times. Herbs are dried and bundled in sacks. You help carry a pail to the ward. Inside, 2 caretakers are wrapping a body. The linen is clean, tied at the feet and neck. A small wooden cross is placed on the chest. They carry the body through the back hallway, past you, and out into the field behind the chapel. The burial ground grows every day. You follow. There is no priest today, only the steady hands of the diggers. The body is lowered without ceremony. One of them whispers something in dialect, perhaps a name. Then the earth is packed down. No gravestone, just a mound, one of hundreds. As the sun climbs higher, you return to the main ward. Some patients sleep, others mumble, eyes open, watching the ceiling. A woman sings softly to herself, a lullaby from a city she will not return to. The physician returns in the afternoon, this time with a cart. Inside, herbs, vinegar-soaked cloths, a book of prayers. He speaks to the patients now, not always words of comfort, sometimes simply questions. What did you eat last? How long have you had the swelling? He writes down everything. Not all plague doctors were charlatans. Some were deeply committed to care, even as their knowledge failed them. A man in the corner begins coughing, a deep wet sound. The physician approaches, nods to the caretakers. The man is carried to another room, set apart. The others try not to look. Evening comes with no real announcement. Just the slow darkening of the sky beyond the shutters. You step outside. The bells ring. Once for the dead. Once for the prayers. Once for the closing of the day. The courtyard empties slowly. The monks return to their chapel. The diggers to their quarters. The cook pours out the last of the broth and covers the pot. You walk once more to the shore. The lagoon reflects the fading sky in quiet ripples. Across the water, you see a light blink from the edge of the city. A lantern, swinging on a dock. It feels impossibly far away. Back inside, candles flicker in niches along the wall. You lie down again in the narrow bed. The man 2 cots away still hasn't moved. You close your eyes and sleep, knowing that tomorrow will begin again in the same quiet rhythm. And this time, you're not afraid. You're simply part of it. The cycle, the silence, the Lazzaretto. You wake before dawn, if such a term even applies here. The Lazzaretto lies in its usual dimness. Light creeps in only slowly, and not even the birds seem willing to break the silence just yet. But something is different this morning. There is a weight in the air. Not illness. No, you know that by now. It's something else. Memory, maybe. A gathering of presence. Something unseen pressing close. You rise and step out into the corridor. The floor beneath your bare feet is cool, almost damp. You walk slowly, past a row of shuttered doors. The only sound is the soft clatter of distant oars somewhere out on the lagoon. Or is that the wind? It's hard to tell here. The island plays tricks sometimes. Past the chapel, past the infirmary, you turn down a narrow hole you've never entered before. The walls here are different, thicker, almost bowed inward. There are old scratches in the plaster, like someone tried to write something long ago and gave up. And then you hear it. A whisper, not a word, not in any language you know. Just breathe. Close, and then gone. You turn quickly, but nothing's there. There are stories on this island. Stories the officials didn't record in the ledgers. Stories that passed from patient to patient, then from caretaker to caretaker, and finally seeped into the stones themselves. Whispers from the walls. You follow the hallway out into a courtyard, the one they rarely used. There's a well here, long dried up, and an old wooden cart, half swallowed by ivy. The ground is softer here, loamy, disturbed. Not official graves, not marked. You stand still. Something brushes past you. Only air, but somehow shaped. You feel watched, but not threatened. Like someone wants to be remembered, or heard. You sit near the well, and slowly, the stories begin to come. They say a woman named Isabetta once wandered these halls, dressed not in the grey robes of the sick, but in a deep blue gown, always clean. She wasn't on any list. No one ever saw her arrive. She just appeared one day, walking the corridors, singing softly to the dying. Some said she was a spirit of mercy. Others, a soul who could never leave, because her love had died here centuries earlier. Then there's Pietro, a gravedigger who outlasted 4 plague seasons. He swore he saw the same boy die 3 different times in 3 different beds. Same face, same eyes, same final word. Aqua. Water. He stopped speaking after that. His tools were found neatly stacked one morning. He was never seen again. Caretakers told stories too, quietly, after dark. Of nights when they would hear doors open in rooms they had locked. Of voices calling their names from across the island when they were completely alone. Of books that moved from one room to another. Of candles that refused to burn in certain corridors. Of dreams, shared, recurring, vivid. You walk now along the perimeter wall. It rises above you like the edge of a fortress. From here, you can see both sea and sky. A faint pink glow signals dawn far beyond the barrier islands. You close your eyes and listen. And again, the whisper, this time closer. You turn and look into the window of the old dormitory. For just a moment, you think you see a figure, tall, still, just beyond the curtains. But when you step inside, it's gone. The bed is made. The air smells faintly of chamomile and dust. Some say that suffering leaves a mark on a place, that repeated grief creates echoes, loops of sorrow that never quite settle. But here on the Lazzaretto, the echoes don't scream. They don't scare. They linger, gently, like a sigh that never ended. Back in the courtyard, you walk beneath a crumbling stone archway. Carved along the edge are faint letters. Vigilate, orate, sperit, watch, pray, hope. You run your fingers along the grooves, and then, laughter. A child's, light and unexpected. You freeze. It comes from the far side of the chapel. You move slowly, quietly, following the sound. You find nothing. Only a ball. A small wooden toy, cracked and weathered, lying at the base of the chapel steps. You kneel beside it, touching the smooth edge, and you realize someone, once, long ago, brought their child here. Maybe she wasn't supposed to come. Maybe they were desperate. Maybe she never left. You leave the toy where it lies. Back near the dock, the wind has picked up. The tide laps louder against the stone. Your boat waits, but you pause. You look back at the buildings, their red tiles faded, their doors crooked, and you feel it again, that invisible audience. They're not trapped, they're just remembered. In the stones, in the names carved along the beams, in the wind that moves through the hallways, in the stories that live only when told. You step aboard, but the island isn't done yet, not quite. Next, you'll follow the plague doctor. You don't sail far. In fact, the boat simply turns, skimming along the same water, tracing the edge of the Lazzaretto as it curves out toward the wider lagoon. The air is cool now, and damp. Morning has fully arrived, but the light is pale and distant. Overhead, a few gulls drift silently, unwilling to call out. Then, you see him. The silhouette appears ahead, motionless, at the edge of the quay. A tall figure in black, hat wide, coat long, hands clasped behind his back, and the mask, impossible to ignore. The long curved beak, two dark eye holes staring forward like polished obsidian. The plague doctor. He doesn't move as your boat approaches. Only when your feet touch stone again does he turn, slowly, and begin walking inland. You follow, though he says nothing. His steps are measured, slow, the rustle of his robe, dragging faintly over the stones. You're not afraid. Not here. Not in this dream. The doctor leads you through the central corridor of the Lazzaretto, past the infirmary, past the storehouses and the kitchens, until you reach a small stone building set slightly apart. A sort of private study, you think, or a chamber of observation. Inside is dim but dry. The air smells of ink, vinegar, and faint traces of lavender. The walls are lined with shelves stacked with scrolls and cloth-bound ledgers. On the central table, a collection of tools, none sharp, none violent, just bottles, herbs, sealed letters, candles, and a long brass syringe. He picks up a book, and then, at last, he speaks. His voice is quiet, too quiet for the room, and yet you hear every word clearly. They called us physicians, but we were record keepers, witnesses, the living among the dead. He places the book in front of you and opens it. Page after page of names, symbols, notes. Marco, age 9, rash, vomiting, survived. Anselmo Baker, refused separation, died in courtyard. Lucrezia, unknown origin, arrived unconscious, eyes open for 3 days, no response, died, no family. The entries go on, some neat, some scrawled, some obviously written by different hands. The doctor begins to sort through a bundle of letters. This one, he says softly, was sent to a merchant's wife. She never received it. Burned for safety. He unfolds the parchment, revealing faded ink. The words are full of longing, apologies, instructions for a will. He picks up a vial, inside a dark liquid, nearly black. This, he explains, was rosemary boiled in red wine, used to wipe the tongue of the infected. It changed nothing, but we believed. Another item, a pouch of cloves. Another, a rolled-up paper charm, inscribed with prayers. Everything here is part of a ritual, part science, part superstition, part helpless human hope. You move to the corner of the room, where a wooden case is partially open. Inside are the garments, the long coat of waxed linen, gloves, the iconic mask. You look closer. The beak is hollow, but stuffed. Lavender, rose petals, mint, camphor. Some believed these herbs filtered out the disease. Others thought they simply masked the smell of rot. Both perhaps were true. He lets you hold it. The mask is heavier than it looks. It presses gently against your fingers, oddly warm. You imagine the weight of wearing it for days at a time, seeing the world only through those narrow, dark lenses. You learn to see without looking, he says, to hear what isn't said, to touch nothing, and yet feel everything. He places the mask back in its box and closes it. Outside, the wind has picked up. He leads you again, this time to the wards. You follow as he visits the sick. He pauses by each bed, tilts his head, notes symptoms. Some patients speak, others do not. He offers water, not words. He listens to the breath, counts the pulse, watches the eyes. He does not rush, and then, at the end of the ward, he stops at a cot where the patient is already gone. The blanket drawn up, a candle burned to its base. He closes the man's eyes, and he whispers, "You are remembered." That, more than any tonic, is his true medicine, not healing, witnessing. You walk with him again, this time to the grave field. He stands at its edge, not entering. These stones, he says, hold more than bodies. They hold the echoes of last words, unfinished prayers, dreams that ended in silence. You wonder how many like him stood in this very spot. Dozens? Hundreds? Did they all survive? Some of us did, he answers, as if reading your thought. And some of us never really left. The wind shifts. You look up. He's gone. No footstep. No closing door. Just the breeze and the long grass rippling near the graves. You stand there for a moment longer, and then turn back toward the sea. You're not alone, but you're at peace. The doctor's work is done for now. Next, we journey to the most whispered about island of them all, Poveglia. The boat drifts again, slow as breath, as you move away from Lazzaretto Vecchio. The water is quieter now, unnaturally still. No birds, no waves, no wind. Even the fog seems to hesitate. Your next destination waits across the southern stretch of the lagoon. No signs point the way. No lights mark its edge. Yet even in dreams, even through the veil of centuries, the name carries weight. Poveglia. An island carved from the edges of history and grief, spoken of in hushed tones, even by those who no longer believe in ghosts. If the Lazzarettos were built to fight the plague, Poveglia became the place where Venice buried the war. You don't see it at first, only a low black line at the horizon, barely rising from the water. But as the boat glides closer, it begins to take shape. A stone bell tower, crumbling, tilting slightly as if in mourning. Ivy-covered walls, broken gates, and the sharp silhouettes of dead trees. No movement, no birds, not even the soft scratch of insect wings. You reach the dock. It is cracked and half swallowed by algae. Your boat touches down without sound. You step ashore. Everything feels quieter here. Even your breathing slows. The buildings, though decayed, stand tall. They were once part of a psychiatric hospital, long after the plague years. But before that, long before, this island served another purpose, a place to put the dead. When the plague waves swept through Venice, thousands died faster than they could be buried. Entire families, whole neighborhoods. The city had no room, no time, so they were brought here, to Poveglia, by the boatload, stacked, buried, burned. And when space ran out, the soil was turned again. New graves over old, ash over bone. Again and again, you walk inland. The trees are twisted, overgrown, but oddly silent. No leaves rustle, no branches creak. Only your footsteps, bare, soft, on the loamy ground. The buildings begin to rise around you. Low dormitories, cracked chapels, a central courtyard thick with moss. The bell tower looms behind it all, its empty windows staring downward like hollow eyes. You approach slowly. No one lives here now, officially, but many claim something else lingers. You enter the first building. The roof is partially collapsed, revealing a shaft of pale daylight through the beams. Vines creep along the floor. You move room to room, each one nearly the same. Beds rusted, walls cracked, faint outlines of crosses above old doorways. Once, patients were brought here from the Lazzarettos, not to recover, to be forgotten. You pass what might have been a ward, rows of iron bed frames. On one wall, someone carved something into the plaster. The letters are faded but clear. Perdonami. Forgive me. No one knows who wrote it. Perhaps a patient, perhaps a doctor, perhaps someone else entirely. Deeper in the island, you reach the fields. Once open ground, now mass graves. There are no markers, just uneven earth. And stories. So many stories. Some say you can hear voices here at night, chanting, sobbing, whispering in Venetian dialects long lost. Others speak of footsteps that follow when you walk too slowly, of cold hands that brush your arm in the dark, of dreams that do not end when you wake. You stand still. You listen. Nothing. And yet, everything.
Your gaze drifts toward the tower. It was once part of a church, then used as a watch post, and finally repurposed during the plague years as a signal station. Some say the bell rang to signal new bodies arriving. Others say it rang by itself, long after the ropes were removed. You step through the overgrown grass toward its base. Inside, the air is dry, thick with dust. The floorboards are broken, and the stairs long gone. Still, you can see the height of the space above, the empty window where the bell once hung. You feel the air shift, not wind, something else, a memory. You close your eyes. You see flashes, a boat, a row of stretchers, a priest murmuring Latin. Fire, always fire. You open your eyes again. The silence returns. Some historians believe up to 100,000 people were buried here during the worst waves of plague. Others say more. There's a rumor that the soil of Poveglia is more ash than earth, that every handful of dirt contains the remains of the dead. You don't test it. You don't need to. You walk back slowly toward the shore. The trees part without sound. The dock reappears. Your boat is still there, waiting. As you step in and push away, you look back at the island once more. The bell tower stands against the dim sky. No sound. But you wonder, what if it rings again? Not for warning, not for fear. Just to say, someone remembers. You drift onward, carried by water and thought. But Poveglia never truly leaves. The water is darker now. Not from clouds or time of day, but from the weight of what you've just left behind. Poveglia disappears into the fog, like a thought you're trying not to remember, like a name on the tip of your tongue. You don't turn back. You don't need to, because now the stories take a quieter form. There's no tower ahead, no gaping crypts, no crumbling plague wards, just a low, green island, a place of wind and grass and silence. You're arriving at the edge of remembrance. Here, on an unnamed rise of land between two more prominent quarantine isles, lie the fragments. What time didn't burn, and what the sea didn't swallow. You step ashore without even realizing it. There are no buildings here, not anymore, just the outlines of them. Dark shapes in the earth where foundations used to be. Beneath your feet, a shallow incline, and beneath that, what remains of 1,000 forgotten lives, lost letters, forgotten bones. You kneel beside a collapsed wall, covered in creeping ivy. Something peeks out from the base, half buried, half washed by years of rain and tide. A coin, silver, dented, stamped with the winged lion of St. Mark. You turn it over in your fingers. Someone carried this here, perhaps clutching it even in their final hour, hoping it might buy mercy, or passage, or remembrance. You place it back in the earth and rise. The breeze whispers through the grass. Walk farther. You find what might have once been a storeroom. The floorboards are gone, but the shadows of shelves remain, charred into the stone. Among the debris, a book spine, cracked and feathered with mold. A bone needle, a child's carved wooden toy, unfinished. These aren't relics you'd find in museums. No golden crosses or decorated chalices. These are the objects that make up ordinary lives. But it's the journals you notice most, scattered, mold-warped, bound with cord or cloth. One lies open, its ink bled into the pages like veins through wet paper. You read what you can. Rain again today. Pietro helped carry the crates. 5 more men brought in. One sang until evening. They stopped feeding the 4th room. She would not eat. Tomorrow we move the bodies. No signature, no year, no certainty if the writer lived. You move on, past a cypress stump. The bark has long since peeled away, revealing the smooth wood beneath, cut with initials, dozens of them. M.S. 1631, A.G. 1629, C.R. Each one a small defiance of time, scratched into the world in the hopes that someone, someday, would look. And now, you do. As you walk farther along the northern edge of the island, the ground shifts subtly. You're standing in a place
where the graves were not marked with stones, but with gestures, a small pile of rocks, a circle of broken tiles, a rusted key, tokens left by survivors maybe, or caretakers too tired to speak. They buried the dead here when the other islands filled too quickly, when bodies had to be hidden from sight, from memory, from city officials and clergy alike. There was no time to write names or dig deep. The bodies were covered, and the earth was told to forget. But it didn't. It never does. A sudden breeze carries a faint scent, clove and cedar. You turn. No one is there, but there is a folded letter resting on the stone beside you. Yellowed, brittle, half-eaten by age. You open it gently. Only 3 words remain. Wait for me. You fold it again and set it down where it was. It doesn't belong to you. Not really. The sky shifts. The tide begins to rise. And now, the voices grow quieter. Not out of fear, but completion. As if the island has said what it needed to say. One last object catches your eye. A small wooden cross, handmade. Its arms bound with twine. Not ornate, just honest. Someone carved it in haste, but carefully. The edges are worn from many hands. You touch it once, then let it go. You walk back slowly toward your boat. The grass parts easily. The sky is calm. This island was never meant to be named. Not because it didn't matter, but because it wasn't made for memory. It was made for forgetting, for burying the unbearable. But forgetting is a myth. The stories remain, even in silence, even in bones, even in the pages you cannot read. You step aboard again. Your boat drifts forward. There is more to see, more to hear, because even in stillness, Venice watched. The boat glides like a shadow across the lagoon's glassy skin. You've left the unnamed island of forgotten tokens behind, but its hush lingers in your breath. The wind is still cool, but the air now carries a hint of firewood, salt, and something oddly sharp. Vinegar, perhaps. Ahead, the silhouette of Venice comes into clearer focus. The domes of churches, the delicate lace of bell towers, and the sharp angles of palazzos slowly emerge from mist. But you're not headed into the city. Not quite. You're skirting its edges, gliding along the invisible border where health met disease, where life watched death from a wary distance. Tonight, you learn how Venice watched the sick, not from within, but from the shore, from its walls, from across the water. You pull up beside a smaller structure, stone, weathered, and half hidden among marshy reeds. It's not a hospital, not a warehouse, not a palace. This is a guardhouse. From here, the officers of the Republic kept watch over the Lazzarettos and the ships held in quarantine. Their orders were clear. No one leaves, no one enters. The plague cannot be allowed to cross the water. You step inside. There's little left, only the shadow of a hearth, a rusted bellhook, a wooden bench now softened by time. But the sense of presence is strong. A journal rests on the bench. You open it. Third watch. 2 lights on Lazzaretto. 1 lantern moving between wards. No boat seen crossing. All quiet. 5th watch. Heard bells on Poveglia. Wind eastward. Smoke observed. Controlled. Page after page of notes. Observations. A city obsessed with containment. From the 15th to the 18th century, Venice enforced one of the strictest public health systems in the world. Quarantine was not just a word. It was a civic duty, a legal obligation, a sacred ritual. Every ship arriving from the east was examined thoroughly. The health of each sailor was noted. The origins of every crate were logged. Special public health inspectors, known as provveditori alla sanità, were appointed. These weren't physicians. They were administrators of vigilance. You drift again, now past the San Marco Customs Quay, where incoming goods were held. Here, you see large vats where items were submerged in vinegar. Letters were pierced with brass skewers and fumigated with smoke and sulfur. Merchants who tried to bribe their way through the system risked exile, or worse. On a nearby post still hangs a flag, faded red, with a white cross in the center.
This was the signal. Plague has been reported. The city watches. From here, you pass along the Riva degli Schiavoni, where stories say that nobles once stood at a distance with telescopes, watching the ships in quarantine, waiting for news. It wasn't gossip. It was survival. Venice developed maps of infection zones, color-coded charts, daily tolls of the sick and dead, posted in marketplaces like grim weather reports. You drift toward the southern edge of the city now, where the Magazzini del Sal, the salt warehouses, stood. In times of plague, these were converted into temporary quarantine depots. Salt, they believed, could purify, and so it was used to surround sick rooms, rubbed onto clothing, burned in fires. Across the water, on Giudecca, a small watchtower stands with no name. Here, a lone officer once kept vigil each night, recording the movement of the lagoon, lantern patterns, whispers carried by wind. You hear his thoughts now, not spoken, but felt. I see 3 boats. One does not return. I smell fire. I do not ask. The lagoon was both barrier and lifeline. It separated the sick from the city. It gave Venice time to study, time to prepare, time to pray. Not every decision was perfect. There were mistakes, delays, poor souls misdiagnosed and sent to die alone. But the system, complex, obsessive, ritualistic, worked more often than not, and it was admired. Other cities sent officials to Venice to learn. London, Marseille, Dubrovnik. They took notes. They copied designs, but few ever matched the quiet intensity of Venetian surveillance. You pass another stone marker now, half sunk in the water. Its inscription reads, Salus Publica Suprema Lex. The public health is the highest law. Venice lived by it, not for morality, not for fear, for survival. And so they watched, from towers, boats, walls, windows. They kept records. They rang bells. They burned letters. They waited. You float now beneath a low bridge into a side canal near the old arsenal. Here, you find the remains of a sanitation station, a tiny building with a tiled roof, almost invisible from above. Inside, remnants of tools remain, tongs for lifting scrolls, gloves stiff with age, small brass containers with burnt herbs still stuck to the bottom. They didn't trust touch. They believed in ritual. And in this city of commerce, of gold, of glass and poetry, nothing was more sacred than the wall between the healthy and the sick, not even God's will. As the canal widened, you drift now through the quietest part of the lagoon, where the water deepens slightly and the current slow. Even the air feels thick here, as if it remembers too much. You're not near the islands anymore. You're in the channel between. There are no buildings here, only water and fire. This is where Venice sent the things it could not bear to keep. Welcome to the domain of the floating corpses and fire barges. The city's sanitation laws, so rigorous in life, extended even beyond death, especially during times of plague. In ordinary times, Venetians were buried in churchyards or crypts, sometimes even inside basilicas if they were wealthy enough. But when death arrived by the hundreds, by the thousands, something else had to be done. And so, the bodies were moved by boat. You see one now, approaching silently through the mist. A wide, flat barge, low in the water. Long poles extend from its sides for rowing, but no one is rowing. The barge floats of its own accord, heavy with weight you cannot see, but you feel. Closer now, and you see them, not faces, just shapes beneath cloth, pale linen soaked through, tied neatly at neck and foot. Dozens of bodies, maybe more, lined up with care. Some bear crosses on their chests, others clutches of herbs or faded ribbons. There is no priest here, only silence. And then, a sound, a single bell, not rung from a church, but struck by hand. Once, twice, 3 times. It signals the final rites. The boat continues its journey, not to an island, but to a remote stretch of water east of Poveglia, where the lagoon deepens and the wind rarely changes. Here,
Venice built its invisible fire pit. The barges were burned. Not always, but often, especially during the worst years, 1575, 1630, 1771. You arrive now at the remembered site. There is no dock, only a sudden widening of the water, and a floating platform. Long metal braziers once stood here, balanced on planks coated with pitch. Fire was not punishment, it was protection. You watch as men in thick leather gloves unload the dead, gently, reverently, onto the platform. They work without speaking. One man lights a torch, another steps back. The flames begin slowly, a soft crackling, then a pop, then the deep roar of resin and wood catching flame. Smoke rises into the still sky. No wind moves it. It forms a black veil, drifting gently over the surface of the lagoon, like mourning cloth. Some say the smell never fully left this part of the water, that even now, on calm days, a faint trace of it returns. Not rot, but memory. Something burned into the very air. You drift quietly around the perimeter of the platform, keeping a respectful distance. You notice small bundles in the corner, personal effects perhaps, jewelry, letters, a child's blanket. These were burned too. In Venice, contamination was not something to argue with. It was something to contain. There were stories, though, of barges that went astray, of boats that were lost in the fog, their rowers dying mid-journey, their passengers already cold. Found days later drifting near the mainland, or washed ashore in the marshes, still bearing their grim cargo. Local fishermen swore they heard them before they saw them. Low sounds, like sighs, like voices underwater. And the fire? It was never quite enough. Because the plague didn't just live in the body. It lived in fear. You glide now through the haze left behind by the imagined flames. The water is still warm from their memory. You see nothing around you. No birds, no fish, not even another boat. Just smoke and the sound of the waves lapping gently against the hull. The Republic recorded none of this in poetry. The fire barges were not sung of in public squares. No saint was assigned to them, but they did their work, day after day, for years. They protected the living. They honored the dead, in silence. You look back one more time. The barge is nearly gone. Nothing left but embers and ash, floating like snow. Your boat turns, slowly, on its own. You're headed back toward the city now, but you're not going home. Not yet. First, you must sit with the silence Venice tried to bury, and failed. You'll see what remained when the fire went out. The boat turns, but not back toward the Grand Canal. Not yet. It moves west, gently hugging the curve of the lagoon, as if tracing the edge of something not entirely gone. The air is clearer now, but the silence lingers, long, deep, like an exhale that is not quite finished. You're returning to the islands, but this time, not to witness chaos, or fire, or fear. You're here to walk through the aftermath and silence. Plague is never a clean ending. It does not finish like a storm. It recedes. It leaves behind a city hollowed by absence. Rooms with no owners. Letters with no readers. Docks with no footsteps. You arrive at San Servolo, a lesser-known island, southeast of Venice proper. It wasn't a major quarantine post during the first waves of plague, not originally. But as the centuries wore on and the Republic's fears deepened, the island was repurposed again and again, first as a monastery, then a hospital, later a sanatorium. Now, it holds mostly memories. You step ashore. Everything here is calmer. The grass is shorter, the buildings better kept. There's a garden near the chapel, where herbs once used in plague treatment still grow. Rosemary, sage, hyssop. You crush a leaf between your fingers. The scent is sharp, clean, like something trying to forget its own purpose. You walk slowly. There are no screams here, no bells tolling. Only the sound of wind stirring the leaves and the faint lap of water at the shore. Inside a small stone building, once a caretaker's quarters, you find a collection of ledgers, meticulously kept, written in careful Italian script. The entries are short, brutally so. 20 April.
3 returned from Lazzaretto Vecchio. 1 walked, 2 carried. 28th April, no new patients. Smoke visible from the south. 3rd May, no boat seen. Wind changed. Each sentence a world of weight. You close the ledger and step back outside. You sit at the edge of a low stone wall, your feet brushing tall grass. And as you breathe, you begin to notice what plague leaves behind when it finally retreats. Quiet, but not peace. Not yet. You see it in the cracks between paving stones, where weeds now grow untamed. In the empty chapel where votive candles are replaced with dust. In the windows with shutters closed from the inside, as if the occupants simply never came back to open them. You imagine the city after the 3rd wave, after the 6th, after the final count. No ceremony marked the end. There was no victory bell, no parades, only a slow return. A child steps into a room that hasn't seen light in months. A baker reopens his stall. A gondolier lifts his oar and pushes forward, hoping his usual passengers are still alive. But nothing feels the same. Venice survived. That much is true. Its trade resumed. Its bridges echoed again with footsteps. Music returned to its churches. But the silence remained underneath, like a soft undertow, a readiness, a memory. You walk now along the shoreline. To your right, the buildings of San Servolo. To your left, the shimmering waters of the lagoon, calm as glass. Ahead, the skyline of Venice itself, still distant, still watching. At your feet, another forgotten marker, a stone set flat in the ground, its inscription barely legible. Qui rimasero, here they remained. It could refer to patience, to caretakers, to souls, or perhaps to the fear itself, which never fully left. You sit beside it. No sounds disturb you. Even the gulls are gone. No voices call out. No lanterns swing. This is not the horror of the plague. This is what happens when it goes quiet. The same rooms, but no laughter. The same streets, but fewer names. The Republic kept careful records, but even in their precision, they could not count everything. Not the dreams cut short, not the lullabies never sung, not the plans that dissolved into ash. You turn your head and look out over the lagoon. Everything looks the same, but everything is different. And now you feel it, the silence pressing in, not as fear, but as invitation, to remember, to sit with it, to know that those who came before you, sick or well, remembered or forgotten, left something behind. A shape in the air, a stillness in the water, a name scratched into stone. You rise again. The sun is setting now. The clouds stretch long and thin across the sky, painted in grays and golds. Venice waits ahead, but the ghosts are not chasing you. They're simply walking with you, quietly, until you reach the next place. The sun dips lower now, its light stretching long fingers across the surface of the lagoon. Your boat pushes forward once more, the wake behind you unraveling softly, like thread pulled from old fabric. The city ahead glows faintly, her rooftops gilded in pale fire. But you're not rushing to Venice, not yet. You have one more place to stop, though there are no docks, no guards, no gates. What you seek now is not a building or an island, but a memory that stretched far beyond the waters of the Adriatic. Tonight, you witness the echoes of the maritime past. Venice may have been the birthplace of quarantine, but it did not hold that secret alone for long. The world watched, the world learned, and soon, across oceans and continents, the idea of separating the sick began to spread like shadow, slow, silent, but persistent. You drift now, not just through water, but across time. Your boat becomes a thread sewn through centuries. It is the 15th century. You pass the port of Dubrovnik, where a Lazzaretto rises on a rocky cliffside. Its walls are strong, its gates iron-bound. The officials here followed Venice's model precisely. They even called their isolation Trentino, 30 days instead of 40. But the idea was the same. Control the illness before it enters the city. You see the ghost of a sailor arrive, his ship red-flagged, his eyes hollow. He steps ashore and vanishes into the gates. No anger, no protest.
only resignation. The water carries you forward again. It is the 17th century. You drift past Marseille, where the plague returns once more. France, too, builds isolation ports, entire islands designed for ships to circle before docking. Lanterns mark the decks. Officials shout from shore in practiced ritual. Again and again, the world replicates what Venice first dared to do. But with each new adoption, something is lost. The quiet reverence of the lagoon becomes the bureaucracy of empires. The patient list becomes a ledger. The death bell becomes a number on a chart. Still, the core remains. Separation as salvation. You drift again. Now past London, where the Great Plague of 1665 has prompted its own brand of quarantine. Houses are sealed, doors marked with red crosses, guards paid to stand watch. A different kind of isolation. Less water, more walls, but the spirit is familiar. In a hidden alley, a woman whispers a prayer you don't understand. It sounds eerily similar to those murmured on Lazzaretto Vecchio centuries before. You pass by Philadelphia in the late 1700s as yellow fever arrives on the ships. The city begins its own quarantine station on the banks of the Delaware River. The buildings are crude, but the idea has finally crossed the ocean. Even here, Venice is present. Not in name, but in legacy. Your boat turns, slowly, returning across the waves toward Italy again. You're not alone on the water anymore. Ships pass beside you. Ghost ships, spectral hulls gliding silently across time. Their flags are faded, their crews translucent, but their purpose is shared. To protect, to isolate, to remember. You return at last to the lagoon, but the city is different now. It is the 18th century. Venice is fading in power, her ships fewer, her merchants older. The Republic is tired, but still, the Lazzarettos operate. Still, the bells ring. Still, the barges burn. It is a city that will not forget what it learned. One final island appears on the horizon, Santa Maria de Nazareth, known simply as Lazzaretto. A smaller quarantine station built during the final century of Venetian independence. It never saw as much use. By then, other ports had taken up the torch, but it remained, a last echo of what began centuries before. You drift past it now. Its chapel collapsed, its rooms open to the sky, but its name remains carved in stone. Even now, some Venetian water taxis pass nearby and speed up, just a little, without meaning to. As if even the present remembers what once happened here. You pass back through San Clemente, San Servolo, Lazzaretto Nuovo. You see them not as isolated places now, but as a system, a web of memory and vigilance. You understand now, Venice wasn't just a city built on water. It was a city built on waiting. Waiting to see if someone would survive. Waiting to see if the symptoms would appear. Waiting for 40 days, and sometimes waiting forever. As your boat rounds the final bend, you see the skyline of Venice illuminated once again by the last rays of sun. The churches, the bell towers, the palaces, all golden, all glowing. It looks like a painting, but beneath the paint is memory. Your boat drifts slower now, as if even the wood itself is weary from the journey. The sun has almost vanished, leaving a quiet silver-blue wash across the sky, and the lagoon reflects it like liquid glass. You approach the final island, the last in this long procession of silence, memory, and water. But this one is different. There is no gate, no smoke, no stone ruins, only stillness. This is where the dream ends. You arrive at the edge of Poveglia again, but not the Poveglia of screams and whispers, not the firelit one, or the shadow of the hospital. This is a different shore, the far side, where the grass grows long and undisturbed, where time settles like dust. This is the place where the journey returns to itself, where you awaken, slowly, still floating. You step off the boat, once more, for the last time. The stones beneath your feet are cracked, but not broken. They feel warmer than before, like they've remembered something. You walk the shoreline, not looking for bones, not searching for graves, just walking. The moon rises over the lagoon, not harsh, but gentle. Its light touches the tips of the grass, the worn edges of the bell tower, the distant roofs of the Lazzarettos across the water. You kneel at the edge of the island and watch the tide roll in. And you think not of plague, or death, or fear. You think of those who stayed, of the caretakers who lived here, year after year, through outbreak after outbreak, burying strangers, writing names no one would read, saying prayers in voices that cracked from fatigue, of the survivors, those who passed the 40 days, who stepped back onto the docks of Venice forever changed, seeing the city not as they left it, but as something newly born, of the plague doctors, masked and silent, wandering through wards not to cure, but to bear witness, and yes, of the dead too, the ones whose names have long since drifted away, but whose presence shaped the city's every breath. They built nothing, they left no monuments, but they are Venice. You lie back now in the grass. The sounds of the water lap gently beside you. The cool night presses against your arms. A soft breeze moves through the trees. You hear no ghosts, no moaning, no bells, only breath, only water, only wind. This is the Venice that still floats, centuries later. Built on loss, held up by silence, but never fully drowned. Your eyes grow heavier, the island fades, the water carries you, slowly, gently, back toward the center of your sleep. Not to forget, but to remember, softly, to hold the stories not with fear, but with reverence. You turn your face to the moon and drift, and now the boat slows. Your journey across Venice's ghostly quarantine islands comes to a close. The stories, once hidden beneath moss and water, have surfaced, quietly. They haven't asked for anything, not for fear, not for pity, only to be heard, once more. The lagoon is calm now, the fire is gone, the bells are still. You lie in your bed, adrift in your own world of dreams, carrying pieces of other centuries with you. A boat's rhythm, the page of a forgotten journal, a candle flickering in a cold ward, the quiet of a city that once waited, always waited, for death to pass it by. But it didn't, not always. And still, Venice endured, as do you. Let your breath soften now, like ripples fading over deep water. Let the images drift into sleep. The long corridors, the crooked crosses, the tall masks watching from doorways. They do not follow. They remain where they belong, on their islands, in their time. All they ever wanted was to be remembered. And tonight, you did that. You listened. You drifted gently through the plague ships and quarantine wards, across bone-laced fields and smoke-lit docks, and you came out the other side, not alone, but accompanied by memory. Let go now. Let sleep take you fully, and if the bell rings again, it will only be in a dream.